A little girl bumped hard into Nate, spilling coffee and dropping a sketchbook. The first page unveiled a secret. My dad lives in a glass castle. Before we begin, let us know where you're listening to the story from. Seattle, Washington, New York, or somewhere else in the world. And when it ends, don't forget to rate the story from 0 to 10. Let's start. Imagine, Nate isn't the type of millionaire who shows off gold watches or supercars. At 40, Nathaniel Harper, or Nate as everyone calls him, is a man who likes to control everything. His penthouse, towering in downtown Seattle, is a cold space of glass and steel, without a family photo, no trace of life. There is only Walter Brooks, a 68-year-old butler, who has been looking after the house since Nate's parents were alive. Walter, with glasses slipping down his nose, often mutters under his breath while dusting silver frames. Master Nate orders Wagyu steak every day but leaves that notebook lying around. Think I didn't notice? Yesterday, he even mistook Nate's work notebook for a menu, shaking his head in disbelief. Salmon or steak, Master? I'm not a chef. A cold wind swept through Seattle Park, carrying the scent of freshly cut grass and the faint aroma of coffee from a nearby cafe. The sound of dry leaves rustling underfoot was like a wordless autumn song. Nathaniel Harper sat on a worn wooden bench, an iPad in his lap, a Bluetooth headset blinking blue. He was ordering lunch, like every day, Wagyu steak, mashed potatoes with truffle sauce, from a prestigious restaurant in his office building. Yes, delivery in 20 minutes, thank you. His voice was deep, concise, with no superfluous note, like the way he runs his tech empire. The park was busier than usual today. Children's laughter echoed somewhere, making Nate frown, unfamiliar with such lively sounds. He placed the unfinished coffee down on the bench, intending to return to his iPad, when a little girl darted by, her blonde hair high in a ponytail, a green wool skirt fluttering. She crashed hard into Nate, causing the coffee in his hand to splash onto his shiny leather shoes. Sorry. Her voice was rushed, but she didn't stop, running straight towards the bushes. The coffee stain on his shoes made Nate sigh, muttering, Really? He shook his head, trying to wipe his shoes with a tissue, but then paused upon seeing a small, worn leather notebook on the path, landing on the grass with a gentle thud. Nate picked up the notebook, looked around. No one seemed to notice. He intended to call after her, but the girl had disappeared behind the trees. His hand brushed over the rumpled leather cover, old and dusty like a distant memory. Just to return it, he told himself. But a corner of the paper sticking out was inviting. He opened the first page, and everything around him seemed to fade. A pencil drawing emerged. A man in a suit standing in front of a towering glass building, holding the hand of a little blonde girl. Beneath the drawing, the shaky handwriting of a child. My dad lives in a glass castle. Nate's breath was heavy. His penthouse, a glass castle amidst Seattle, appeared in his mind. Could it be? That girl is his daughter? He looked towards the horizon where the penthouse shimmered in the sunset glow. Claire Donovan, his ex-girlfriend who left 10 years ago without a word, resurfaced in his memory. This drawing, it resembled Claire, every pencil line carving out a past he tried to bury. He flipped to the next page, quicker, as if drawn in. Another drawing. A smiling woman with long hair, bright eyes, standing in front of a wooden house with smoke from the chimney. Claire. His heart raced, hand tightening around the notebook. The ringtone interrupted his thoughts. Nate, are you ready for the San Francisco meeting? His assistant's hurried voice came through the headset. But Nate didn't respond. He stood up quickly, the notebook still in hand, eyes fixed on the path where the girl disappeared. The assistant called again, worried. Nate, are you listening? He turned off the headset, tossing it into his bag, not noticing the unfinished coffee lying neglected on the bench, dripping onto the grass. Nate hurriedly walked across the park, the notebook feeling like a ticking time bomb. He stopped under a large oak tree, sunlight filtering through the leaves, scattering sparkling fragments onto the notebook cover. He reopened the first page, staring at the father-daughter drawing, the shaky handwriting etching into his heart. He flipped further, searching for clues. A small paper note, neatly folded, slipped out, landing on the grass. Nate picked it up, hand trembling. An adult's handwriting, Claire's familiar script. Amelia, my love. If one day you find your dad, let him know you're the light of my life. Nate's breath caught. Amelia. The blonde girl. His heart pounded fiercely, as if it wanted to pierce through his chest. He looked towards the bushes where the girl had vanished, then back at the distant penthouse, gleaming like a reminder. Nate remembered Walter grumbling this morning at the coffee stain Nate left on the table. Master, coffee is for drinking, not for painting. Walter shook his head, trying to clean up, but dropped a silver spoon, the clink echoing. Walter didn't know that Nate was now facing a truth he never expected. But who was that little girl? And why did this drawing feel like a message from Claire, pulling him back into a past he had once left behind? The crunch of dry leaves underfoot echoed as Nate hurried through Seattle Park, clutching the sketchbook tightly to his chest, his eyes scanning the path for the blonde girl. Amelia, he murmured, his voice trembling, stripped of the arrogance of a millionaire. A chilling autumn wind blew through, carrying the scent of grass and fallen leaves. Nate stood beneath the great oak where she disappeared 3 days prior, clutching the notebook, the phrase, "My dad lives in a glass castle," burning in his mind. That day, after finding the notebook, he had roamed the park, asking every passerby, an old lady pushing a cart, a jogger, a group of kids playing ball, but no one knew the girl in the green wool dress. A blonde girl around 9, has anyone seen her? His voice anxious, unlike the calmness he exuded when signing million-dollar deals. He called his assistant, tension in his voice. Check every child welfare center in Seattle. Find a girl named Amelia, Mother Claire Donovan. His assistant hesitated over the headset. Sir, I am preparing for the San Francisco meeting. Nate cut in, nearly shouting. Forget the meeting. Find the girl now. He hung up, oblivious to the unfinished coffee on the park bench now spilled, dripping onto the grass. He remembered Walter, the 68-year-old butler. This morning grumbled at the coffee stain Nate left on the penthouse table. Master, coffee is to drink, not for painting. Walter mistook Nate's work notebook for a menu, carefully setting it aside. On the second day, Nate returned to the park, each step heavier. He sat on the old bench, flipping through the notebook again, staring at the father-daughter drawing, the phrase, "My dad lives in a glass castle," like an unsolved riddle. He called 3 more social organizations, his voice hoarse from lack of sleep. A girl named Amelia, Mother Claire Donovan, passed away 2 years ago. None had answers. His penthouse towering over Seattle now seemed a reminder of the solitude he once chose. Claire, his ex-girlfriend, left 10 years ago because he was too busy building an empire. Did she hide Amelia from him? On the third day, the assistant called back, excitement in his voice. Sir, I found an Amelia Sullivan at the Seattle Child Welfare Center, Mother Claire Donovan. Nate stood up suddenly, the notebook dropping to the bench, his heart pounding. He drove furiously through the Seattle streets, city lights blurring past. As he pushed open the welfare center door, the sound of his leather shoes echoed on the glossy linoleum floor, the pungent smell of disinfectant hitting his nose. A woman stepped out, Rebecca Larson, or Becca, 32, an art teacher with neatly tied brown hair and a beige sweater. Her blue eyes were as sharp as a blade, arms crossed over her chest. Mr. Harper? I'm Becca, Amelia's temporary guardian. What are you doing here? Nate held up the notebook, his hand slightly shaking. I found this in the park. It's Amelia's, isn't it? And Claire Donovan. She's the mother. Becca squinted, her gaze skeptical. Claire died 2 years ago. She left a letter saying you're Mia's father. But you didn't know anything about the girl, did you? Why are you showing up now? Her words were cutting, slicing into Nate's memories of Claire. Her radiant smile, paint-stained hands, and the day she left when he chose work. He lowered his head, his voice hoarse. I didn't know. If I had known, things would have been different. Becca led him to a small office, papers piled high, children's smiling posters on the walls. A fluorescent bulb buzzed above. Amelia, Mia, sat on a plastic chair, her legs dangling, drawing on a piece of paper. Her high ponytail swayed, pencil tightly gripped in her tiny hand, as if drawing was her only way of being. Nate looked at her, her blue eyes exactly like his. His heart pounded. The center director, a silver-haired woman, walked in, holding an old envelope. Mr. Harper, this is Claire's letter. Nate opened the envelope, the sound of paper rustling in the quiet room. Claire's handwriting appeared, familiar script like a blade. Nate, if you're reading this, you found Amelia. She's your daughter. I hid her because you chose your empire. But Mia deserves a father if you're willing. Nate's vision blurred, his breath caught. He looked at Mia, still drawing, unaware of the weight of the letter. Emotions crashed over him like waves against the shore. He's a father. Mia is his daughter. He turned to Becca, voice trembling. I want to meet her. I need to know if she's okay. Becca crossed her arms, her gaze softened but still firm. Mia lost her mom. She doesn't need a millionaire showing up then disappearing. You need to prove you're serious. Mia looked up, her blue eyes skimmed over Nate, then returned to her drawing. What are you drawing? Nate asked, kneeling to her level, his voice awkward, lacking his usual millionaire confidence. Mia shrugged, showing him a drawing. A girl and a man under a tree, holding a star. Nate held his breath. The man looked like him. You draw very well, he said, his voice going hoarse. Mia smiled a little for the first time. The director spoke, her voice stern. Mr. Harper, there's a protocol, DNA testing, home assessment. You need to pass these tests. Nate nodded, his mind whirling. He watched Mia, adding stars to her drawing, tongue peeking out in concentration. Becca stood there, skeptical gaze lingering, but her crossed arms slackened slightly as if contemplating. Did Claire leave anything more in that letter? Why was Becca so fiercely protective of Mia? And how will Mia react when she knows this stranger is her father? This morning, the Seattle Children's Center agreed to let Mia visit Nate's penthouse, a trial step before he officially applies for adoption. Claire Donovan's letter, Mia's mother, still echoes in his mind. Mia deserves to have a father, if you're willing. But what does it mean to be willing? Nate, a 40-year-old millionaire, accustomed to commanding boardrooms with his cold voice, is now awkward before Mia's blue eyes, identical to his, like a reminder of the past he once left behind. The sound of a red wine glass shattering on the glass floor of the penthouse, the glass shards sparkling like fallen stars. Mia, the 9-year-old blonde girl, stands stunned, her eyes wide, whispering, I'm sorry, Uncle Nate. Nate kneeled beside the little girl, awkwardly picking up the shards, his voice gentle, far from his usual arrogance. It's okay. It's just a glass. But his heart beat strongly, not because of the glass, but because of Mia, Amelia, his daughter, first stepping into his world. The cool glass floor underfoot, the Seattle lights shining through the large window, making the apartment sparkle like a castle in the girl's drawing. Mia clutched her sketchbook tightly, her sneakers squeaking as she stepped back, her eyes gliding around the spacious room, devoid of paintings, devoid of life signs. Heavy footsteps echoed from the hallway. Walter Brooks, the 68-year-old butler, appeared, glasses perched on his nose, holding a broom like an old knight. "Master Nate, what's broken here?" He frowned, looking at the shards on the floor. "This little girl messed up the whole penthouse." Mia shrugged, smiling mischievously. "I just wanted to see if the glass was heavy." Walter huffed, muttering, "Heavy? Heavy like a whole week's cleanup for me." But he swept the floor slowly, glancing at Mia, as if scared to startle her. Nate stood up, the corner of his mouth slightly curving. "Walter, let me handle it." He led Mia to the silver dining table, where the delivery staff just brought the food box from the luxurious restaurant. The smell of grilled lobster and creme brulee wafted through the room. Mia climbed onto the high chair, swinging her legs, her eyes lighting up. "What delicious food did you order, Uncle?" the little girl asked eagerly. Nate, awkward, not used to talking to children. Lobster. Do you like it?" Mia nodded, smiling radiantly, warming Nate's heart like the light from the girl's drawing spreading in the cold room. The doorbell rang, interrupting the moment. Rebecca Larson, or Becca, the 32-year-old art teacher, stepped in, her brown hair neatly tied, the beige sweater hugging her figure. Her blue eyes glided over the room, stopping at Mia, then looking at Nate, not crossing her arms like before but still carrying a scrutinizing look. "Mr. Harper, I'm here for the checkup, as agreed with the Children's Center," she said, her voice light but sharp. "Is Mia okay? Besides breaking your glass?" Mia giggled, her mouth chewing lobster. "I'm fine, Ms. Becca. Uncle Nate has a house as big as a castle." Becca smiled, placing a hand on Mia's shoulder, her eyes softening. "Castles are beautiful, but children need more, Mr. Harper. What have you prepared other than ordering food out?" Nate frowned, her words hit the mark. "I'm trying," he said, his voice hoarse, his eyes sweeping over Mia, the little girl scribbling on a napkin, turning the restaurant's logo into a sparkling star. "I want Mia to have a home." Becca nodded, but her eyes still doubtful. "Mia lost her mother 2 years ago. The little girl needs a father, not just a guest stopping by. Are you ready to change your life?" Nate held his breath, looking at Mia, the girl adding stars to the drawing, her tongue sticking out in concentration. "I'm ready," he replied, his voice confident but inwardly anxious. His penthouse with glass floors and silver tables. Is it the place for a child? "What do you like to eat?" Nate asked Mia, trying to be close. The little girl looked up, her eyes bright. "Pasta with tomato sauce. My mom made it delicious." Nate nodded, but his mind swirling. Pasta? He's never cooked, only knows how to order from a restaurant. "Let me try," he said, his voice hesitant. Mia giggled as if predicting the outcome. In the kitchen, Nate stood before the pot of boiling water, holding the dry pasta box, awkward like a child. Walter passed by, shaking his head in exasperation. "Master, pasta isn't a contract. Don't look at it like that." Nate laughed, but right then, the acrid smell wafted up. The pot of pasta burned black, smoke hissing, alarms blaring shrill. Mia ran in, hugging her sketchbook, laughing uproariously. "Uncle Nate, your pasta turned to ashes." Becca, standing at the kitchen door, smiled lightly, but her eyes still scrutinized. "Mr. Harper, if this is how you take care of Mia, the Children's Center will have difficulty agreeing. The girl needs stability, not kitchen fires." Nate wiped sweat from his forehead, trying to remain calm. "I will learn," I will do it. But the center's test, DNA test, housing evaluation, seemed like a mountain ahead. Mia returned to the dining table, continued drawing on the napkin, undeterred by the tension. She pointed to the drawing. A man, a little girl, and a wooden house. "This is my mom," Mia said, her voice small, eyes twinkling. "Mom said my dad is in a high place." Nate held his breath, his heart racing as if pulled back to the past with Claire. "What does the girl know about him?" Becca placed a hand on Mia's shoulder, her voice gentle. "Mia, if Uncle Nate wants to be with you, he must try harder. What do you think?" Mia shrugged, but her eyes glanced at Nate, as if considering. Walter brought out a creme brulee, muttering, "Little girl, eat this. Don't let the master ruin the kitchen again." Mia laughed loudly, dropping the spoon, the sound ringing on the glass floor. Will Nate pass the center's test to keep Mia by his side? What is Becca thinking when she looks at Mia with a worried gaze? And is Mia ready to open her heart to this stranger father? Lively pop music rang out from the children's store speakers, mingling with the rustling of shopping bags as Nate Harper awkwardly placed them down on the Seattle Park bench. Mia, the 9-year-old girl, swam in the oversized green sweater he just bought, laughing gleefully. "Uncle Nate, do I look like a giant?" A few days after Mia called him a hero in her drawing, Nate was determined to take the girl shopping, wanting to transform the cold penthouse into a real home. This morning, in the vibrant lit children's store, he stood still among the colorful clothing racks, holding the sweater twice Mia's size, awkward like a lost child. "Does this suit you?" he asked, his voice hesitant, devoid of the tech millionaire's confidence. Mia shrugged, her eyes twinkling mischievously. "I like it, but did you buy this for yourself?" Nate blushed, laughed, his heart warmed by the girl's smile, like autumn sunlight piercing through Seattle Park branches. Today the park was bright, soft grass underfoot, the rustling of dry leaves as Mia ran and jumped, the sweater dragging like a sail. Nate sat on the wooden bench, Mia's sketchbook beside him, worried about the children's center's test, DNA test, housing evaluation, still hanging over him. Mia's words, "Dad is my hero," echoed in his mind, like a promise he must fulfill. But what does it mean to be a father? He watched Mia, her sneakers squeaking on the grass, wondering if he had enough love to become who she needed. Heavy footsteps echoed from the pathway. Walter Brooks, the 68-year-old butler, appeared, glasses perched on his nose, holding a cleaning cloth like an old knight. "Master Nate." The girl put dirty shoes on the shopping bags. He frowned, looking at the muddy marks. Mia laughed loudly, raising her foot. "I'm testing if the grass sticks, Uncle Walter." Walter huffed, muttered, "Sticky? Stickier than your master's contracts." But he cleaned the bag slowly, his eyes glancing at Mia, as if afraid to upset her. Nate led Mia to the ice cream stall in the park, the vanilla scent blending with autumn wind. Mia climbed onto the high chair, swinging her legs, her eyes lighting up seeing the chocolate ice cream cone. "Uncle Nate, my mom makes gingerbread cookies better than ice cream," the little girl said, her voice eager yet nostalgic. Nate held his breath, his heart aching at the mention of Claire. "Ginger cookies, huh? I will try to make for you," he said, his voice hesitant, determined to learn again the tomato sauce pasta Mia loves, but knowing he wasn't ready to venture into the kitchen after last time's fire. Mia giggled, seemingly predicting his awkwardness. This morning, before heading to the store, Nate had tried to comb Mia's hair, clumsily holding the elastic band, making her hair into a crooked bun. Mia looked in the mirror, laughing uproariously. "Uncle Nate, I look like a clown." Nate scratched his head, blushing. "I will learn to tie better." Mia shrugged, still laughing, as if opening her heart to him, even if only a little. In the store, he even mistakenly bought a superhero backpack instead of the star backpack Mia liked. Mia shook her head, voice mischievous. "Uncle Nate, I like stars, not superheroes." Nate laughed, awkwardly scratching his head. "I will buy right next time." The phone rang, interrupting the moment. Becca, Mia's teacher, called from the children's center. "Mr. Harper, I'm coming to the park to check," she said, her voice light but scrutinizing. "Is Mia okay? Besides wearing a giant sweater?" Nate blushed, looking at Mia licking ice cream, the sweater dragging. "The girl is very happy," he replied, his voice hoarse, trying to hide his awkwardness. Becca appeared, her brown hair neatly tied, her blue eyes gliding over Mia, then stopping at Nate. "Mr. Harper, Mia needs a home, not just ice cream or wrong-sized sweaters," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "What have you prepared to be a father?" Nate frowned, her words hit the mark. "I'm trying," he replied, his eyes sweeping over Mia, the little girl scribbling on a paper from the ice cream stall, turning the logo into a sparkling star. "I want Mia to have love, not just outside food." Becca smiled gently, her eyes softening, as if seeing his determination. "Mia lost her mother 2 years ago. The girl needs stability, Mr. Harper," she said, putting her hand on Mia's shoulder. "Are you ready to change your busy life?" Nate looked at Mia, her tongue sticking out as she focused on drawing, his heart beating strongly, as if wanting to break down the cold wall he built all these years. "I am ready," he said, his voice certain. "For Mia." Becca sat down next to Mia, her voice gentle. "Mia, do you like staying with Uncle Nate?" Mia looked up, her eyes bright. "He's bumbling, Ms. Becca, but he's nice." Nate laughed, blushing, trying to hide his embarrassment. Mia gave the paper drawing from the ice cream stall, her voice clear. "This is my mom. Mom said my dad is in a high place." Nate held his breath, his heart racing as if pulled back to the past with Claire. He opened the paper, his heart seemingly stopping seeing the scribbled words below the father-daughter drawing. "Dad is my hero, but I want to eat Mom's pasta." The chalkboard clicked as the teacher tapped the chalk, echoing in the brightly sunlit Seattle classroom where Nate Harper stood awkwardly, holding a kindergarten storybook, face flushed. "Mr. Harper, Mia is in 4th grade. Isn't this book for 3-year-olds?" The teacher smiled, her voice light but teasing. A few days after Mia called him a hero in a drawing, Nate was determined to take her to school, wanting to prove he could be a true father. But this morning, in the school hallway filled with the scent of chalk and new paper, he felt as awkward as a student called to the board. "She likes this story," Nate said, holding up the vibrant cover featuring a little bear, his voice hesitant, lacking the confidence of a tech millionaire. Mia, a 9-year-old girl with blonde hair and a ponytail, stood nearby, shaking her head with a giggle. "Uncle Nate, I'm older now. I like stories about astronauts." Nate scratched his head, blushing, his heart warming from her mischievous smile, like autumn sunlight streaming through the classroom window. The school was bustling today, the sound of children's laughter from the playground, autumn wind rustling through the halls with the scent of freshly cut grass. Nate led Mia into the classroom, her sketchbook clutched tightly in his hand, worrying about the Child Welfare Center's review, DNA tests, housing assessments, hovering like a dark cloud. Mia's words, "Dad is my hero, but I want Mom's noodles," echoed in his mind, like a promise he had to keep. He looked at Mia, her sneakers squeaking on the wooden floor, and wondered if he could provide the love she longed for. The teacher, a young woman with a gentle smile, looked at Nate, speaking softly. "Mr. Harper, Mia has a family drawing assignment this week. Have you talked to her about family? Nate frowned, flustered, his heart aching at the thought of Claire. I haven't. But she talks about her mom, he replied, his voice trembling, trying to hide his awkwardness. Mia laughed loudly, her voice playful. Uncle Nate, I told you Mom makes gingerbread cookies, you forgot. The teacher chuckled while Nate blushed, mumbling, I'll remember next time. In the afternoon, Nate brought Mia back to the penthouse, the Seattle lights reflecting through the large window, making the glass floor sparkle. Mia sat on the high chair, eating gingerbread cookies from a restaurant, crumbs rustling onto the table. Uncle Nate, my mom makes better gingerbread cookies, she said, her voice small, eyes glistening with longing. With fragrant ginger, sweet honey, and a crispy crunch. Nate held his breath, his heart aching at the mention of Claire, as if she was pulling him into her past. Gingerbread cookies? He said softly. I'll try to make them for you, okay? Mia giggled, her eyes lighting up, as if trusting him a little more. Heavy footsteps echoed from the hallway. Walter Brooks, the 68-year-old butler, appeared, glasses perched on his nose, holding a cleaning cloth. Little lady, crumbs don't disappear on their own, he muttered, looking at the cookies' crumbs on the table. But instead of cleaning them up, he carefully gathered each piece, putting them into a small box, muttering humorously. This little lady reminds me of the days I used to keep paintings for the young master. Mia laughed loudly, raising her hand. Uncle Walter, keep them for me, to build a gingerbread house. Walter snorted softly, but his eyes softened, as if he was gradually becoming fond of the little girl. The doorbell rang, cutting the moment short. Becca, Mia's art teacher, walked in, her brown hair neatly tied, her blue eyes scanning the room. Mr. Harper, I'm here for another check, she said, her voice gentle but sharp, like an elder sister protecting her little sister. How is Mia? Aside from the gingerbread mess. Mia giggled, raising a crumb. Miss Becca, Uncle Nate promised to make gingerbread cookies. Becca smiled, her eyes briefly trusting. Mr. Harper, Mia needs a father who listens, she said, her voice gentle. Have you tried to understand what she remembers about her mom? Nate frowned, her words hitting home, like a subtle jab at his pride. I'm learning, he replied, his eyes drifting towards Mia, who was folding a paper star from cookie wrappers, her tongue sticking out in concentration. I want Mia to have hope, to have a real home. Becca nodded, her eyes softening as if she saw his sincerity. Mia needs time, Mr. Harper, she said, placing a hand on Mia's shoulder. But she's opening up. Can you see it? Nate looked at Mia, his heart pounding, as if it wanted to break down the cold walls he'd built over the years. I see it, he said, his voice firm. For Mia. Becca sat down beside Mia, her voice gentle. Mia, have you told Uncle Nate anything about your mom? Mia looked up, her eyes sparkling. I told him Mom makes gingerbread cookies, and she said my dad is the best. Nate held his breath, his heart aching, drawing him back into memories with Claire. Mia ran over, placing the paper star in his hand, her voice clear. Uncle Nate, this is for you, like the star Mom used to draw. Nate opened his hand. His heart seemed to stop when he saw the little paper star, glittering under the light, with the scribbled words beneath. Dad is my star, but I miss Mom. Nate hugged Mia, comforting the little girl on the penthouse sofa, silently thinking, I will bring the best things for you, compensating you with the love from both Dad and Mom. The plan to make her favorite pasta dish began to form in his mind. Tomorrow I have an important foreign partner meeting I cannot miss. The day after tomorrow, definitely the day after tomorrow. I will dedicate a whole day to do this. That night, Nate sat in front of the iPad screen, the blue light flickering on his face. The sound of a YouTube video rang out crisply in the shiny penthouse kitchen, guiding how to make tomato sauce pasta. Pick Roma tomatoes, chop finely, Nate mumbled, taking notes, focused as if preparing a multi-million-dollar project. Mia curled up on the sofa, holding her sketchbook, humming a song her mother used to sing, making Nate's heart ache. The paper star drawing the other day, with the words, "Dad is a star, but I miss Mom," felt like a promise he had to keep. The Foster Center test results, DNA testing, home evaluation, hung in the balance, urging him to bring love to the little girl. The morning of the next day, Nate stood in the bustling Seattle market, the rustling plastic bags mingling with the scent of fresh herbs. He hesitated in front of the vegetable stall, holding a tomato, mumbling, "Roma or San Marzano?" An old lady vendor laughed, handing him a bunch of basil. "You need this, not onions." Nate blushed, scratching his head, warmth flooding his heart as he thought about Mia's smile, like autumn sunlight filtering through the park trees. Returning to the penthouse, Nate placed the bag of ingredients on the kitchen table, the scent of ripe tomatoes wafting gently. Mia hopped around the table, her sneakers squeaking, her voice crisp. "Dad, Mom's pasta had fragrant basil, sweet tomatoes." Nate held his breath, his heart aching at the mention of Claire, as if Mia pulled him into her own memories of her mother. "I'll make it like Mom," he said, his voice gentle, though his mind panicked when he opened the YouTube video. The sound of the knife chopping tomatoes clacked on the cutting board, but Nate fumbled, making one roll onto the floor, sauce splattering across the kitchen like an abstract painting. Mia giggled uncontrollably, jumping onto the high chair. "Dad, you're like a wall painter." Nate blushed, trying to pick up the tomato, muttering, "I am trying here." But when he poured salt into the sauce, mistaking it for sugar, a spicy scent rose sharply. Mia scrunched her nose, coughing. "Dad, this pasta is spicy now." In Nate's moment of despair, Mia shouted loudly, "Dad, ask Ms. Becca for help, or our whole family will be starving this noon." Like finding a life raft, Nate immediately made a phone call, his voice flustered. "Becca, I'm in trouble with the pasta." Becca laughed over the phone, her tone teasing. "Millionaire loses to tomatoes? I'm coming right away." She appeared, her brown hair tied neatly, her blue eyes scanning the chaotic kitchen, then resting on Mia. "Nate, Mia says the pasta is her entire world," she said, her voice gentle but sharp. "To be a father, you must make this dish." Becca rolled up her sleeves, showing Nate how to chop tomatoes, stir the sauce, and boil pasta. The sound of sizzling pans, the fragrant scent of basil wafting, mixed with the laughter of Mia as she attempted to stir the sauce, splattering it onto Nate's shirt. "Ms. Becca, Dad, the sauce is escaping," Mia exclaimed, her voice mischievous. Nate awkwardly wiped his shirt, splattering sauce on Becca's hair, making her laugh. "Nate, the sauce is for eating, not for your hair." Nate blushed, muttering, "I am learning." His eyes lit up as he looked at Becca, as if seeing a companion amid his storm of clumsiness. Butler Walter appeared just in time, holding a cleaning cloth, muttering as a habit, "Master, this kitchen is not a meeting room." But he crouched down to pick up the piece of paper Mia had dropped, carefully tucking it into his pocket, humorously mumbling, "Little girl, this piece of paper is more valuable than the master's contract." Mia laughed loudly, hopping. "Mr. Walter, make pasta with me." Walter lightly huffed, but his eyes softened, like a grandfather gradually growing fond of the girl. After an hour of struggle, the tomato sauce pasta dish was completed, brilliantly red and fragrant. Nate placed the bowl in front of Mia, his heart pounding loudly as anxious as facing shareholders. Mia took a bite, her eyes lighting up. "Dad, it's like Mom's pasta." "Almost." Nate held his breath, his heart aching when thinking of Claire, as if she was smiling through Mia's smile. Becca patted his shoulder, her eyes sparkling. "Nate, you did well. The center will acknowledge it." After the meal, Nate sighed with relief, sitting next to Becca on the sofa, his voice hoarse. "Thank you, Becca. I don't know how to be a father, but Mia makes me want to try, every day." Becca smiled, her voice gentle. "Nate, she needs you to listen, as you did today. You're making progress." Nate nodded, his eyes brightening like an invisible string pulling them closer. "You know," he said in a deep voice, "I once thought I couldn't do it. But Mia, and you, give me hope." Becca looked at him, her eyes sparkling. "Mia is lucky to have you. And I see you're not bad," she teased, her voice light as autumn breeze. Mia ran to the sofa, gently placed a paper star in Nate's hand, then ran off, her eyes gleaming. Nate opened the star. His heart seemingly stopped when he saw the scribbled words. "Dad makes pasta like Mom, but I want Dad to tell me stories about Mom." He realized this was the girl's habit when wanting to become closer to him, wishes coming from the stars. He whispered, his voice trembling with emotion. "I will tell. Thank you, dear daughter, for being here with Dad." The night wind hissed through the penthouse window like a cold whisper mixed with Nate Harper's trembling voice as he recounted stories about Claire. "Your mom used to paint under the moonlight, Mia," he said, sitting next to his 9-year-old daughter on the sofa, a dim yellow light casting over the sketchbook in her hands. "She said every star is a story." Memories of his love from 10 years ago flooded back. He was trying to tell his daughter the most beautiful things about her mother. She fell asleep peacefully in his arms, and for the first time in 10 years of loneliness, he felt a profound sense of happiness. But then, on one silent night, Mia's cries pierced through the bedroom, sharp as a knife. "Daddy, Mom is gone," she shouted, her voice trembling from a nightmare. Nate rushed in, heart pounding, holding Mia tightly, awkwardly comforting her. "I'm here, honey. It's okay." But her sobs didn't stop, causing him to panic. He called Becca at 1 a.m., his voice shaky. "Becca, Mia had a nightmare. I don't know what to do." Becca, sounding sleepy but gentle, responded immediately. "I'm on my way, Nate. Keep her calm." Becca arrived, her brown hair slightly tousled, wearing a loose sweater, her blue eyes worried but warm. "Mia, I'm here," she said, sitting beside the girl on the bed with rumpled, soft blankets. "Tell me, honey, what did you dream about?" Mia whimpered, hugging Becca tightly. Mom was painting, but then she vanished." Nate frowned, his heart aching, unsure how to console her. Becca smiled, her voice as gentle as an autumn breeze. "Nate, why don't you tell her a fairy tale? Mia loves the stories her mom used to tell." Nate, feeling uneasy, opened a fairy tale book but misnamed the princess. "And Cinderella rode a white horse." Mia giggled through her tears. "Dad, it's Rapunzel, not Cinderella." Becca laughed, her eyes lighting up. "Nate, if you get it wrong, Mia won't be able to sleep." Nate blushed, muttering, "I'm learning." They continued the story together, their voices blending, guiding Mia back into sleep, like a gentle melody dispelling the nightmare. The next morning, Mia awoke, her voice bright. "Dad, Aunt Becca tells stories as well as Mom." Nate smiled, his heart warming, though he worried about the upcoming custody hearing. Becca sat next to him, her voice gentle. "Nate, Mia needs you to tell stories about her mom. to make her feel safe. Nate nodded, his eyes brightening as if an invisible string was pulling him and Becca closer. "You know," he said, his voice hoarse, "Mia makes me want to be the best father I can be. And you help me see that." Becca smiled, her eyes sparkling. "Mia is lucky to have you, Nate. But the trial will be a big challenge." The old butler, Walter, appeared just then, holding a tray with hot tea, mumbling as was his habit. "Master, telling stories in the middle of the night. I'm getting old." But he carefully placed the tray in front of Becca, his gaze softening, like a grandfather fond of the little girl. "Little one, this tea will help you sleep well," he said gently. Mia laughed loudly, skipping around. "Uncle Walter, tell me a story too." Walter snorted softly but carefully picked up a piece of paper Mia had dropped, tucking it into his pocket, muttering humorously. "This piece of paper is more precious than the master's contract." Nate awkwardly tucked the blanket over Mia, making a mess of it. "Dad, it looks like a bird's nest now." Mia laughed, her voice playful. Becca chuckled teasingly. "Nate, you need to learn how to tuck in blankets before becoming a father." Nate blushed, mumbling, "I will learn." Mia hugged Nate, whispering, her voice clear. "Daddy, don't let them take me away." Nate stood frozen, feeling his heart stop momentarily, knowing the upcoming trial would decide everything. Part 8. A week later, the day of the important decision had finally arrived. Nate Harper tossed and turned all night. The Seattle lights cast through the penthouse window, reminding him of the trial at 10 a.m. the next morning. Early in the morning, he walked into Mia's room and gently kissed her forehead, speaking softly. "Wake up, my dear daughter. Wish your dad good luck in winning the trial to bring you home forever." Mia yawned long and hugged her drawing book, giggling. "Dad, I wish you win. But you have to tell a story about Mom, too." Nate held his breath, his heart warmed, like autumn sunlight streaming through the window. In the Seattle courtroom, the sound of a wooden gavel echoed sharply like the rhythm of Nate's heart when he stood before the board of trustees. The smell of old wood and papers mingled under the harsh white lights, the cold, hard wooden chair under his hand. The board, 3 stern members, looked at him with scrutinizing eyes. "Mr. Harper," one member asked, voice cold, "your work schedule is full. How can you be a father to a child?" Nate furrowed his brow, his heart raced, his gaze glanced out the window where Seattle was misty. "I will cut down on work," he replied, voice firm but slightly trembling. "Mia is my family." In the penthouse a few miles away, Mia sat on the sofa, drawing pictures of her dad as a knight under sparkling lights. The butler, Walter, watched over her, holding a cleaning cloth, muttering, "Young lady, don't turn the sofa into a gallery." But he carefully helped Mia hang the picture on the wall, mumbling humorously, "This painting reminds me of the young master back in the day." Mia laughed loudly, dancing. "Uncle Walter, Dad is a knight, isn't he?" Walter snorted lightly, but his eyes softened, like a loving grandfather to the little girl. Earlier in the morning, Walter had tried to teach Mia to fold a blanket, but she turned the blanket into a castle. "Young lady, I'm old," he muttered, but helped Mia build the castle, his eyes briefly joyful. Mia shouted, "Uncle Walter, this castle is for Dad when he wins the trial." Walter snorted but carefully kept Mia's drawing as a precious keepsake. In the courtroom, Becca entered, her brown hair neatly tied, her sharp yet warm blue eyes. "I am Rebecca Larson, Mia's art teacher," she said, voice gentle but determined. "I have witnessed Mr. Harper's progress. From cooking spaghetti to telling fairy tales, he is learning to be a father." The board nodded, but a member questioned, Ms. Larson, Mr. Harper is constantly busy with work. Does he really have time? Becca smiled, her voice sharp. Nate cancels meetings to be with Mia. That's what the board needs to see. Nate looked at Becca, his eyes shining like seeing a fellow companion. Thank you, Becca, he said, his voice husky. The board took notes, but one member spoke up. Mr. Harper, you once let work overshadow your personal life. What guarantees that this time is different? Nate hesitated, his voice trembling. I'm definitely free. The board furrowed their brows, the atmosphere tense, but Becca interjected. Mr. Harper has changed because of love for Mia. I see it every day. In the penthouse, Mia drew an additional star on the picture, humming. Dad is my father. Walter sat next to her, muttering. Young lady, don't draw on the table. But he carefully kept the drawing, his eyes bright. This is saved for the master. Mia laughed loudly, dancing. Uncle Walter, Dad will win, right? Walter snorted lightly but nodded, like believing in Nate. After the trial, Becca pulled Nate into the hallway, her eyes briefly worried. Nate, I found something at the support center, she said, handing him an old notebook, its cover worn, the faint smell of old paper wafting. This is Claire's diary. It could change everything. Nate stood stunned, his hand trembling as he touched the notebook, like touching a secret from the past. The night after the trial, the gentle vibration of the phone in the penthouse interrupted as Nate Harper called Becca, his voice trembling with anxiety. Becca, I just received Claire's diary from you. It's keeping me up at night. The yellow Seattle lights shone on his face, blurred by the memories of 10 years ago, when he left Claire due to being engrossed in work. You advised me to look carefully. I need your help, he said, clutching the phone tightly, as if clinging to a fragile hope. Becca responded over the phone, her voice gentle but tense. Nate, I found this diary at the shelter. Claire left it for you, hoping you'd find Mia. But there's something important. She paused, sighing. Claire wrote that she sent you letters through the company in 2016 when Mia was 4 years old. The letters were kept back by your former assistant because they thought you didn't care. The board could use this to dismiss your case. Nate was stunned, his heart nearly stopping, his hand trembling as he put down the phone. Letters? I received nothing, he said, his voice hoarse, his eyes dark with suspicion. The former assistant may have hidden them from me. Becca responded, her voice filled with concern. Nate, we need to find him before the second court hearing next week. Otherwise, the board will think you deliberately abandoned Mia. Nate sat on the sofa, his eyes drifting to Mia, the 9-year-old girl drawing a picture of her mother under the lamp, her sneakers squeaking as she swung her feet. Dad, what did Mom write there? Mia asked, her voice clear, her eyes sparkling. Nate held his breath, his heart aching as if Claire was speaking through the ink strokes. Mom wrote about you, about the love she has for you, he said, his voice hoarse, his eyes shimmering as he saw Mia's smile, like seeing Claire come alive. The next morning, Nate took Mia and Becca to Seattle's park, the sound of the lake waves blending with Mia's ringing laughter as she swam in the water. Dad, Aunt Becca, swim with me, Mia shouted playfully, splashing water onto Nate's shirt. He awkwardly tried to swim after her, his clothes soaked, stumbling on a rock, nearly falling. Becca laughed loudly, teasingly. Nate, you swim like a fish out of water. Running your company is easier. Nate blushed, chuckling, mumbling. I am learning. Mia jumped around, telling how her mother loved swimming under the moonlight, warming Nate's heart, seeing Claire through the girl's smile. Becca swam over to help Nate stand up, her eyes twinkling. You're doing great, Nate. Mia needs you like this, she said gently, like a sweet consolation. After a morning at the park, Nate took Mia and Becca back to the penthouse, the three laughing and talking on their way home, determined to bake ginger cookies to cheer the girl up. In the kitchen, Nate tried baking, but the flour spilled onto the floor, the kitchen looking like a white desert. Mia giggled uncontrollably, jumping onto a high stool. "Dad, the kitchen's turned into a flour desert," Nate mumbled, blushing. "Dad is trying," Mia shouted playfully. "Dad, do it again, like Mom." Nate laughed, his heart warming, seeing Claire through the girl's smile. Butler Walter appeared promptly, holding a towel, mumbling, "Young lady, this table is not a pool." But he helped Mia clean the watercolor she drew at the park, humorously mumbling, "Young lady, this painting is better than the master's contracts." Mia laughed loudly, jumping. "Uncle Walter, this picture is for Dad." Walter lightly sniffed, but his eyes softened, like a loving grandfather to the girl. Becca sat next to Nate, her voice gentle. "Nate, I called the former assistant. He admitted keeping the letters because he thought you didn't want to be involved. We can take his testimony to explain." Nate nodded, his eyes brightening as if an invisible string was pulling him and Becca closer together. "Thank you, Becca. I don't know how to be a father, but Mia makes me want to try every day," he said, his voice hoarse, his eyes sparkling with emotion. Becca smiled warmly. "Mia is lucky to have you, Nate. I see you changing because of her. But you must prepare for the court session." Nate took a deep breath, opening his heart to Mia. "Mia, I was wrong to leave your mom because of work. I didn't know she sent letters, but I will dedicate my life to you," he said, his voice trembling, tears rolling down. Mia ran to him, hugging tightly, her voice sobbing. "I want to be with you, Dad. I'm not mad at you." Nate hugged the girl, his heart breaking with love, tears falling onto Mia's hair. "I promise, you will never be lonely again," he whispered, his voice full of determination. Becca looked at Nate, her eyes worried. "Nate, this letter could make the board suspicious," Claire wrote. "Nate, I sent letters in 2016, but you didn't respond. Mia needs you." He held it back, thinking you didn't care. "The board might dismiss your case if they think you intentionally abandoned Mia." Nate tightened his grip on the diary, his heart aching as he read Claire's last line. "Nate, Mia needs you to be her father. Don't let her be lonely like me." He looked at Becca, his voice hoarse. "I will find a way to prove my case. I cannot lose my child." Becca nodded, her eyes sparkling. "You can do it, Nate. We will overcome this challenge together." Mia's dry cough echoed in the penthouse at 3 a.m., sharp like a knife cutting through Nate Harper's sleep. He rushed into her room, heart pounding, to find Mia curled up on the bed, her skin pale yellow, with weary eyes. "Mia, how are you?" he asked, voice trembling, holding the 9-year-old tightly. "Dad, I'm so tired," Mia whispered weakly, making Nate's heart ache as if pierced by a knife. Tears rolled down his cheeks as he remembered Claire once mentioned her own poor health, now seemingly passed down to his daughter. "You're going to be okay," he whispered, his voice choked, hands shaking as he wiped the sweat from Mia's forehead. A few days after reading the last line in Claire's diary, "Nate, Mia needs you to be a father. Don't let her be as lonely as me." Nate remained worried about the second trial, but tonight, the fear of losing his daughter overwhelmed him. He called Becca, his voice panicked. "Becca, Mia's sick. Her skin is yellow and I don't know what to do." Becca, her voice groggy yet determined, responded immediately. "I'm coming, Nate. Call an ambulance." He nodded, his hands trembling as he dialed, tears falling onto the floor as if Claire was whispering from the past, reprimanding him for not being there sooner. Becca arrived, her brown hair slightly disheveled, her sweater askew, eyes blue with concern as she examined Mia. "She might have G6PD deficiency," she said tensely. "It's a genetic condition from her mother, caused by a lack of the enzyme glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase. If severe, she needs emergency care." Nate held Mia, tears streaming, his heart breaking. "You're going to be okay," he murmured, his voice choked, recalling Claire's sacrifices for Mia. The ambulance siren wailed, taking all three to Seattle Hospital, the beeping of the heart monitor blending with Mia's faint cries, cutting through Nate like a knife. At the hospital, the doctor examined under the cold white lights, Mia's face pale. "G6PD deficiency," the doctor stated. "Inherited from her mother, caused by enzyme deficiency. She needs an AB blood transfusion immediately due to stress or oxidative drugs." Nate was stunned, heart racing. "I have AB blood," he said hoarsely. "Take my blood." The doctor nodded, preparing the needle, and Nate clasped Mia's hand, tears falling as the needle pierced his skin. "Dad's here, sweetheart," he murmured, a choked voice remembering Claire once said Mia was her light. The red blood flowed from Nate to Mia, like a stream of love connecting the father and daughter, making his heart ache but filled with hope. He cried, tears falling onto Mia's hand, berating himself for not protecting her sooner. Becca stood by, eyes sparkling, wiping the sweat off Mia and Nate. "Nate, you did great," she said gently, grasping his hand. "You saved her." Nate looked at Becca, tears flowing. "I can't lose her. Claire once said Mia needs me, but I wasn't there." Becca wiped his tears with warmth in her voice. "Nate, you're here now. I understand loss. My mother left when I was young. But you and Mia are giving each other a chance." Nate's heart pounded, feeling a family forming in this moment. "Becca, thank you," he whispered, his eyes glimmering with emotion. Walter appeared, holding a tray of hot tea, mumbling, "Master, telling stories at midnight." But he placed the tea gently before Becca, his eyes softening, like a grandfather caring for his grandchild. "Little one, have some of this," he said warmly. Becca smiled, thanked him, easing the tension. Mia weakly smiled, whispering, "Dad, like Mom saved me." Nate hugged her, tears falling, seeing Claire smiling through Mia's smile. Nate sat by Mia's bed, awkwardly telling a fairy tale to soothe her. "And the prince rode a whale." Mia giggled weakly, her voice teasing. "Dad, it's a white horse, not a whale." Becca chuckled, teasingly saying, "Nate, you tell stories like signing a contract." Nate blushed, mumbling, "I'm learning." But he tucked Mia in, making a mess that looked like a bird's nest, making her laugh harder. "Dad, the blanket is a bird's nest now." Becca helped adjust it, her hand brushing Nate's, her eyes glimmering. "You did well, Nate," she whispered gently, a sweet comfort. After a few hours, Mia gradually improved, her skin pink again, eyes brightening. Becca wiped the sweat off Nate, speaking softly. "Nate, you saved her. You are really a father." Nate looked at Becca, eyes glimmering. "Thank you, Becca. I don't know how to be a father, but you and Mia make me want to try. I lost Claire and I don't want to lose my daughter." Becca smiled, her hand on his. "Nate, I understand loss. My mother left when I was young, leaving me alone. But now, seeing you and Mia, it feels like a family." Nate's heart pounded, tears falling. "Becca, I want this family," he whispered, eyes glimmering with emotion. Becca nodded, her gaze warm. I do too, Nate. We'll do this together. Mia woke quietly, calling for them. Dad, Miss Becca. Nate and Becca bent down, their hands still clasped together. You're better now, right? Nate asked, his voice shaky. Mia smiled, weak yet radiant. I'm better, Dad. I want you and Miss Becca with me forever. Like a family. Nate hugged Mia. Becca embraced them both, tears falling as a new family took form. You are everything to me, Nate whispered, his voice choked. Becca wiped her tears, smiling. We're a family, Mia. Becca looked at Nate, her eyes sparkling as Mia peacefully slept. Nate, you've become her father. But the second trial will be the ultimate test. You need to prove it to the council. Nate squeezed her hand, his heart pounding, eyes bright. I'm ready. For my family. The sound of the wooden gavel echoed through the Seattle courtroom, sharp as Nate Harper's heartbeat as he stood before the Board of Trustees, holding a blood transfusion certificate, his voice trembling as he began his defense. Members of the board, I am Mia's father, he said, eyes nervously glancing at the video call screen, where Mia sat in the penthouse, drawing a picture of her father as a knight under the glow of yellow lights. 1 week after Nate's blood transfusion to save Mia from G6PD, the second hearing arrived to decide custody. The night before, Nate lay awake, Seattle's lights casting through the penthouse window, as if reminding him of Claire's words in her diary. Nate, Mia needs you to be a father. This morning he kissed Mia's forehead, whispering, You're staying home with Uncle Walter. I'll win for you. Mia smiled, her voice pure. You're my knight. Win, okay? Nate's heart warmed, but he was anxious about Becca's words. The second hearing will be the final test. In the courtroom, the smell of old wood and paperwork mixed under harsh white lights, the cold wooden chair beneath Nate's hand. The board, 3 stern individuals, scrutinized him. Mr. Harper, one member asked with a cold tone. Claire's letter indicates you've been distant for years. How can you prove you're responsible enough to be a father? Nate frowned, heart pounding, eyes glanced out the window. I didn't receive the letters, he said, hoarse. An old assistant withheld them, thinking I didn't care. But I proved my fatherhood by donating blood to Mia. Becca entered, her brown hair tied neatly, her sharp yet warm blue eyes. I'm Rebecca Larson, Mia's art teacher, she said, her voice steady. I witnessed Mr. Harper give his rare AB blood to save Mia from G6PD anemia. That shows he places his child above all. The board nodded, but a member questioned. Ms. Larson, Mr. Harper used to prioritize work. What ensures he's changed? Becca smiled, her voice sharp. He skipped important meetings to be with Mia. I see a man living for family. Nate looked at Becca, his eyes brightening as if seeing a kindred spirit. Thank you, Becca, he said, voice a bit raspy. He presented the blood transfusion certificate, voice trembling but firm. I used my own blood to save Mia. That's proof of both blood ties and fatherly love. The board took notes, tension in the air, but a member spoke up. Do you have any other evidence? Nate fumbled, grabbing the wrong documents, holding up a lobster contract. This is a lobster contract? He blushed. Becca chuckled softly, whispering, Nate, focus. The board frowned, but the tension eased. Meanwhile, in the penthouse, Mia was drawing her father as a knight, humming. You're my dad. The butler, Walter, supervised, holding a cleaning cloth, mumbling. Little miss, the sofa isn't a gallery. But he carefully hung the drawing on the wall, humorously mumbling. This drawing reminds me of when the young master used to draw recklessly. Mia laughed loudly, hopping around. Uncle Walter, Dad will win, right? Walter huffed lightly, but his eyes shone, as if believing in Nate. In court, Becca continued. Mia needs a father like Mr. Harper. He's shown his love through actions, not just words. Nate nodded, eyes sparkling. I'm ready to do everything for Mia, he said, voice confident. She's my hope. The board discussed. The rustling of papers sounded. Then the chairperson banged the gavel. Mr. Harper, you are granted custody, with the condition to reduce work travel. Nate sighed with relief, tears streaming down, his heart bursting with joy, remembering Claire believed in his fatherhood. Via video call, Mia exclaimed. Dad, you look so big. Nate laughed, awkwardly adjusting the camera. I'm learning. Mia smiled, her voice clear. You're my knight. Nate hugged the screen as if hugging Mia, his heart warmed. Becca put a hand on his shoulder, her voice gentle. Nate, you did it. Mia needs you and I want to be around too. Nate turned, his eyes sparkling. Becca, I want this family with you and Mia. Becca smiled, gently squeezing his shoulder. Me too, Nate. We made it through. After the trial, Nate returned to the penthouse, hugging Mia, tears falling. You're mine forever, he whispered. Mia hugged back, her voice happy. You and Ms. Becca are my family. Becca stood by, her eyes glistening. Nate, we overcame the final test. Now it's time for a real family. Nate smiled, his heart pounding, looking toward the future with Mia and Becca, as if seeing Claire smiling from afar. The ticking sound of the clock echoed in the penthouse at 6 a.m. on a beautiful late June morning, as Nate Harper stood in front of the mirror, hands trembling while holding the sparkling diamond ring. Today, he would propose to Becca at Seattle Park, where the morning sunlight streamed through the window, reminding him of Claire's words. Nate, Mia needs you to be a father. He closed his eyes, tears rolling down, remembering the last time Claire smiled under the moonlight, embracing her belly while pregnant with Mia. Claire, thank you for leading me to this family, he whispered, his voice choked with emotion, heart pounding with hope and anxiety. He carefully put the ring in his pocket, reassuring himself. Becca, Mia, I won't let them be alone. Nate entered Mia's room and saw the 9-year-old drawing a family picture under the yellow lamp, her sneakers squeaking as she bounced around. Sweetheart, I have a surprise for you and Miss Becca today, he said warmly, his heart fluttering. Mia smiled, her voice clear. Daddy, I want to sprinkle flowers. I'll be the little bridesmaid. Nate laughed, hugging her, tears of happiness streaming down. You're my star, he whispered, remembering how Claire used to call Mia that. The whole family got in the car to Seattle Park, with Walter beside him, holding a box of flowers for Mia, mumbling, Master, don't mess things up out there. I'm old already. But he secretly placed a hand on Mia's shoulder, his eyes softening like a loving grandpa. Becca sat next to Nate, smiling. Nate, you seem nervous, she teased, touching his hand lightly. Nate blushed, whispering, You'll see why. I want you to be a part of this family. Becca looked at him, eyes sparkling, her heart pounding. Nate, I feel that, she replied gently, opening a door to emotions. In Seattle Park, the wind rustling through the green trees blended with Mia's sound laughter as she ran around, holding a flower basket. Nate held Becca's hand, leading her to the lakeside, where the sunlight shimmered like a dream scene. Becca, he said, kneeling down, his voice trembling. I lost Claire because of work, living in solitude for 10 years. But you and Mia have given me a chance to start over. I want you to be my wife, the mother of Mia. Will you marry me? Becca was stunned, tears streaming down as she covered her mouth. Nate, I never expected. Mia cheered, sprinkling flowers over Nate's head. "Miss Becca, be my mom." Becca laughed through tears, nodding. "Yes, Nate. I want this family." Nate slipped the ring on, awkwardly at first, causing Mia to laugh loudly. "Daddy, the ring's crooked." Nate blushed, adjusting it, heart pounding with happiness, hugging them both tightly. "Thank you, my girls," he whispered, tears falling. After the proposal, the family went to the Claire's Canvas Center, built by Nate to remember Claire. Applause resounded as the inauguration began, sunlight streaming through the large glass windows, making the space radiant. Nate stood in front of the crowd, his voice hoarse. "This is a place honoring Claire, who gave me Mia. She is the light that led me to this family. Thank you to her, and thank you all for being here." Becca held his hand, smiling. "Nate, you've turned pain into hope," she said warmly. Mia ran over, exclaiming, "Daddy, I want to draw with everyone." Nate hugged Mia, and Becca hugged both, tears falling like a newly formed family. The whole family stood before the white wall, painting a large picture of their journey. Mia smiled, painting a shining star. "This is my family." Nate and Becca looked at each other, hands woven tightly, tears falling from happiness. "We've overcome every challenge," Nate whispered. Becca smiled. "For love, Nate," Mia narrated, her voice pure. "I dreamt of Mom smiling with us." Nate hugged the little girl, tears falling. "Mom is always here, my girl." Suddenly, Mia found an old wooden box in the corner of the center and opened it to see a drawing Claire had made of a family of 3 under the moonlight, with shaky handwriting. "For Nate and Mia, the day you were born." "Daddy, it's from Mom," the little girl exclaimed, voice trembling, tears flowing. Nate held the drawing, hands shaking, tears falling as he read the small note. "Nate, love you forever. Take care of Mia." He sobbed, remembering the last time Claire smiled, and Becca hugged him from behind, whispering, "Nate, she'd be proud of you." Nate's heart pounded, as if Claire was smiling from afar, happiness surging. Mia hugged them both, crying. "Mom is here with us." Walter stepped in, mumbling, "Girl, don't scribble on the couch." But he hung the drawing on the wall, humorously mumbling, "This painting reminds me of how the master used to scribble." Mia sprinkled flowers on the painting, laughing out loud. "Uncle Walter, flowers for Mom." Nate chuckled, hugging the whole family, heartwarming. Becca held his hand, her voice gentle. "Nate, we found each other. This is our family." Nate looked at her, eyes sparkling. "Becca, I want us to be like this forever. Thank you for being here." A month later, the Claire's Canvas Gallery opened free classes for children under 10. Laughter echoed as Becca held a pencil, teaching the kids how to draw a star, her voice gentle. "Children, paint what's in your heart." Mia, the adorable assistant, ran around helping the younger kids color, laughing brightly. "I'm drawing a star for Mommy," a little boy exclaimed, making Mia smile. Walter mumbled, "Girl, stop making a mess," but helped hang the paintings on the wall, his eyes softening. "This painting is better than the master's contracts." The children laughed aloud, the atmosphere warm, like a big family. 3 months later, the city children's drawing competition was held at Claire's Canvas. Applause surged as the organizers announced, the Claire's Canvas students' paintings swept the first, second, and third prizes. Mia's painting depicting a family of 3 under the moon went viral online, with thousands of shares and comments. "Love this family." Nate hugged Mia, tears falling. "You've made Mom proud," he whispered. Becca smiled, holding his hand. "Nate, you've created something miraculous." News spread quickly, with the community praising the center, making Claire's canvas a symbol of hope, the laughter of children echoing throughout Seattle. At the end of the day, the family stood in front of the center, painting a large picture of their journey. Mia smiled, painting a shining star. "This is my family." Nate and Becca looked at each other, hands woven tightly, tears falling from happiness. "We've overcome every challenge," Nate whispered. Becca smiled. "For love, Nate, and for the memories of Claire." Mia narrated a dream, her voice pure. "I dreamt of Mom smiling with us." Nate hugged the little girl, tears falling. "Mom is always here, my daughter." Becca held Nate's hand, whispering, "Nate, you have given me a family. I was once lonely after losing my mom, but now I see a future with you and Mia." Nate looked at her, eyes sparkling. "Becca, I want us to be like this forever. Thank you for being here." The two embraced, hearts beating in unison, like a promise for the future. The journey of Nate and Mia shows that love always finds a way home, even through pain and loss. If the story made you smile or touched your heart, please comment and hit like, share, subscribe to True Millionaire Moments. Share with us the happiness from any simple thing you've ever experienced in life, to spread happiness and beautiful memories. You are always our motivation to grow every day. Thank you.